All right, so what are we talking about?
All right, let's get into it. Yeah, so today what we're going to talk about really is processes. We're going to talk about sort of, the processes and sort of getting started with turning them into procedures. I guess the first thing with processes is most people be aware why they're important, but let's just quickly run through why that is. It's going to save you time. It's going to keep your quality up. Three, it's actually good for positioning if you start to talk about your processes. And then four, if you start to actually standardize this stuff, it just means you can give it to other people. So they're the four probably key points that people want to start doing, some sort of process. And similar to I think of it like the same as brand versus branding, right? We all have a brand. Everything has a brand anyway. When you start to do branding, it's when you start to take action on those things. And it's the same with processes. I believe that we all already have a process. You have a way that you work. I have a way that I work. We've got Maria jumping in. Awesome. So we all got a different way that we like to work, and even though they can be very similar, there's these little finite things that we do that distinguish ourselves. So it's really important to know that you already have a process, and then the next step is to starting to work out what things you actually want to take to the next step and document. And like I said, I think there's two areas that you want to document that stuff is. One is you want to document your processes so that clients can understand the way that you work. Doing that really gives them an idea of who you are, how you think, why you're different. And again, if we look, if say me and Nick, we've got exactly the same web development process and we've talked about the same stuff, that my language is different, and me talking about the way that I work is going to sort of help me distinguish from Nick versus me, even if we're doing exactly the same steps. So that's really important. And then the next thing is, getting into documenting it. And I think I'll start to open this stuff up and get other people's thoughts, but there's a few ways to do that. There's sort of the formal way, and that's, using something like Process Street's pretty popular for creating, standard, processes. What is it called? SOPs.
They're like checklists. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can kind of really bootstrap it and do it really daggly. And an easy way to do that is to, pen and paper or a notepad, text document. Yep, anything like that. And as you work through something, record your steps. The other thing that I never really thought about as a process, but really started to understand was the things that you do all the time, like the same freaking emails. And people sort of just have the same, like, how much for this? If you've written the same thing like 5 times in your life, just save that somewhere. I've just I actually use not Text Expander. I use something called Catcher, which is similar to Text Expander. And what I'll do is when I post this stuff, if we mention anything like Process Street or, Text Expander, I'll put some links in with the videos. But I think that's a really easy way to start. Like if there's emails that you write all the time, or there's things that you paste into I've got some code snippets, for example, that I always use on, for rollovers. And then if you can sort of save yourself some time with doing those things.
Well, let's go back a couple of steps, right? So this is now getting specific on methods and methodologies and stuff. What you said about process, like the different reasons to implement process. Like we all have processes, we all have things that we do. But when you start talking about documenting processes, it's basically being intentional about how you do things. And that process of documentation, what I've found anyway, is that process of documentation forces me to think about how I do things and get very clear. Because this is anything that I'm going to do more than once, ideally, I should consider putting a process in. So it is me being intentional about how I do things. That then flows on to client confidence, my own confidence, the quality, reliability, the option of scaling and putting more people into my business. I can give them my processes. Sometimes they're called SOPs, like I think they're called, what's that, statement of process or whatever.
Standard operating procedures.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Man, sorry, it's like one coffee today. I'm like,
you're doing better than me.
Battery, yeah. So yeah, standard operating procedures. And so you have your standard operating procedures, you put a staff member in and you can kind of slot them in and go, here you go, here's how you do these things. So you need to look up how to go through a design process, discovery with a client, well, here is the steps that you go through. If you want to, I don't know, like export logos from a completed file, here's the process you go through for that. Here's where we store documentation. And so you start recording these processes to make things easier and better for you. And then you use that in different stages of your business. So you can use it on your website where you talk about how we work. You can use it in your proposal, in again, how we work. You can actually, the way you do your proposal, you could have a process for that. It's how you differentiate like the quality of service as well when you talk to your clients about the different things. Like it's something I mentioned in my sales process, which again, another process, is my design process. And I run through how I deliver the quality of work. And so that's a differentiator, me versus some random like person who.
You calling random, bro? Who you calling random? But I think that's a really good point. I was going to say that, like, around that idea with the processes, with sort of presenting that to clients, I think what that does is you sort of define it as like how we work is how we think, and it really shows the prospect more than the actual steps that you take. Have I lost everyone's sound? I can't hear anyone. No, you're there.
Yep.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah,
we're just very quiet.
Yeah.
They're all bored, man.
I know. I thought people were going to be into this one. Oh well.
Gotta ask more questions.
We're not bored.
Have to get some
absorbing all the goodness.
But have to get some design memes.
It all.
Oh my God, where are you? Where are you, Laura?
Ellie Beach.
Jealous.
Damn.
Up in Queensland.
Wow.
Yeah, it's actually nice today, which is good.
Well, it's been raining all day at home, but you missed a cracking weekend. It was the best weekend we've had for ages.
I know, and it rains here.
Oh no!
I wore jeans and a top.
There you go.
You stole all my holiday sunshine.
Yeah. I'm a bit jealous that you're on holiday. Anyway, I'll handle it.
Oh, Nick's on holidays now. Where are you, Nick? Now Hawaii.
This is Hawaii. Maui.
Something that I was going to say, and it's something around checklists. It's probably a really easy place that a lot of us should be starting, especially if we make websites. A pre-launch checklist. That was one of the, I've to be honest, I've still got a lot. Nick with those glasses. I've still got a lot of procedures and stuff that I need to create. But a pre-launch and a post-launch checklist were one some of the early things that I did. And what you'd be amazed with that is how much stuff you kind of forget. And if they talk about with pilots, that pilots have an actual checklist. And it's probably, I'm talking from memory here. I don't have any statistics. I haven't pulled anything up. But what I believe is that it's one of the biggest contributing things that have reduced accidents. That is, since they started to introduce stuff, and it's simply just a checklist where they go through and check, like, yes, the fuel gauges have been checked and all of that sort of stuff. So I think that's really important for people to keep in mind, that this stuff is, quality control, not just for our end result, but for ourselves. It sort of keeps what we're doing,
I feel like just having a checklist, a process, anything, and starting to tell your clients, like, right from the beginning, well, here's my process. Whether it's 3 steps or 30 steps, it sort of lets them know immediately, like, you're fitting into my box, the way I do things. You're not going to run the show. Like, this is how it's done.
Yep. 100%. That's you go, Nick.
That's something actually I said in a lot of like presentations and a lot of when I do talks and stuff, is that if you don't have a system to sell, you're at the mercy of your prospect system to buy. And I can tell you now, your prospect system of buying is definitely not going to be in your favor. So so that's just one area where the process matters. Like, you want to work your way, the way that allows you to do the best possible job. So you figure that out, you put that as a process, and then you go, hey, here's my process, this is how we're going to work. And when people try to jump that, you rein it back in to like, no. And if they try to jump it repeatedly, you kind of cut them loose, because from experience, there's a lot of tears later.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
the thing with
manly
that,
tears into your scotch, if you're me, but definitely tears.
my tears are definitely not manly, but they're often into scotch. But what you're sort of saying there is really about that initial part of positioning yourself as the expert. And when you sort of start working with a new prospect, the way that a relationship starts is how it continues. And that's, like in real relationships with people, it's really hard to change people's perception around who you are once you've allowed them to see you a certain way. So I think that's a huge, huge point to bring up, Trader, even if it's just a few steps. It also helps people understand, it builds trust, because you're saying, look, I have a process, which means I've done this enough times that I've actually got a solid process. So you're comforting them by explaining that. And it gives them some idea of where they're going to be in the scope. So if you sort of say, when I talk about my process, I'll actually say, hey, a part of the process is this. This is sort of like the pre-sales call, where we're just trying to work out if we're a good fit, what you do, those sorts of things. And then I'll explain the other parts, and they'll know, oh, we've moved on to that next stage. So yeah, that's really, really important to sort of, for positioning, but also to keep that relationship, to start that relationship as you intend to go on.
Let's do some questions. I know Maria has a question.
Oh,
Or her question was whether she's allowed to ask questions. So I'm assuming there's going to be a follow-up.
So you can interrupt at any time, anyone. It's no big deal. This is
please interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry, please.
Sorry,
please.
It's my first hellos, my first
great to see you.
So
yeah.
And you guys are complaining about weather in Australia. I'm in Canada and it's like 6 degrees, so don't complain.
It's freezing and 14 degrees here. It's terrible.
And that's Celsius. I don't know if you're talking about Fahrenheit.
Celsius.
Yeah, Celsius.
14
My
Celsius.
sister's in Brisbane, and her fiance was saying, oh, it's 22 degrees. There's a bit of a wind chill. And I said, please don't. There's no wind chill in Australia. So anyways, to the question, I was really interested in this one because I'm actually trying to streamline my processes and my procedures. And I'm wondering what other software you guys use in order to do this, anything forward facing. Like I'm considering Dipsado. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one or not. And I've been going through the list and that one keeps on coming back to me. And I actually have a call with a specialist who I'm probably just going to get her to set it up for me. But I just want to know if that's kind of like the best choice as a branding designer, in this realm of work, like what you guys would use or recommend. So that's my question. Thank you.
Well, I know that Laura definitely uses Dubsado. I'm an ex-Dubsado user. I used it for about 3 years. And I moved away from, it's a great tool, by the way. I'm not going to shit can it or say that it's not right. And I think for the one thing you've already raised with Dubsado, I'll just specifically talk about Dubsado for a second. One thing that you've already raised with that is you're looking at someone to help you get set up. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make with Dubsado. They look at it, they see that it does all this stuff. It's got all automation baked in. You can, ping stuff off when people send a request and make it fill out a form and all this sort of stuff automated. It's great. But then they forget that it probably takes 2 weeks to sit there and work out this sort of stuff. And part of that is actually working out what your flow is. And a lot of the time, you've never really thought about it. You just sort of have this organic approach. And maybe it changes a little bit. You pick up the phone or someone emails, and sometimes you wait 3 days before you contact them back, and sometimes you ring them straight away. And so with something like Dubsado, it can become really confronting if you haven't already acknowledged that there's a shit ton of work to get it set up. So that's really important. If you do that, it'll start to pay for itself straight away. And for me, the only reason why I moved away from it is purely that I wanted a little bit more control over a couple of things. I think that Dubsado's project management is a little bit light. I don't use it. I never, ever from the start used it for the proposals or accounting. So it connects to QuickBooks, which is what I use anyway, but I don't use QuickBooks for my quoting. I'm the sort of person that originally went to Dubsado because I wanted everything in one place. And then I started to slowly put things in other places because I wanted things that specifically worked a specific way. And yes, it means I have to go to different places for different tools, but I feel like in the long run, it's saving me time because my proposal software is exactly how I want it to work, no compromises. And my accounting software, same, no compromises. And my accountant can get in there and do all the stuff that she needs to do. And I never have to think about it. All I do is send off the invoices. I don't really do the bookkeeping or anything like that. But so that's why I slowly moved away from Dubsado. A lot of my processes that I'd sort of started to set up in Dubsado, I put into Asana, and I moved to ClickUp for a while, and then I moved back to Asana. So I think there's probably a few ClickUp fans here as well. Yep, Leanne and Rich. But Laura, did you have any thoughts on Dubsado?
I use it, but I am looking at getting a professional as well, just to come in and just help me get to the next level with it. I think it definitely would be something that would be beneficial. I think the thing that I find hard with that is that I want to know what is going on. I don't want a system where I don't know what's happening between me and my clients. I definitely want to know kind of exactly what's going on. So that's where I'm kind of struggling to hand over the reins with that. But I use it I don't use it as my project management.
Yep.
I use it as clients. I use it in my CRM basically. So I basically use it, Corey, the two things you said you don't use it for.
Yeah.
I use it for my accounting and my CRM. So I use it for proposals and managing client official communications and invoicing, and keeping on track of where people are at with payments and client information. But then I use ClickUp at the moment for my project management. Dubsado is really cool, but it's massive. It is, and I've kind of been using it for a year, a bit more than a year.
Yep.
And I think it definitely, I feel like almost having someone set up from the start would be good, but also learning all the things I have has been really beneficial because now I have a better idea of what I want help setting up.
Yeah. And I don't know what the professionals offer. I know I was a bit shocked when I first bought Dubsado. It was quite a long time ago. It was a little bit newer than what it is, and I think people's understanding of it is a bit broader than what mine was when I got it. But I was surprised when I bought it, and then I jumped into the Dubsado group, and it was basically everyone screaming at me, "Hey, pay me to set it up for you because you're going to struggle." And I was like, "Really? Come on."
Get out of here.
And I didn't do it for a long time, and I wish that I did.
So I've got some general advice around processes and tools. It's something I see a lot of people do. And so what they'll do is they'll jump on a tool thinking that that's going to solve their process issues. So for example, they'll go, you know what, I'm having issues with my processes and whatever, I need to figure it out. I'm going to go and sign up for Dubsado and use that. And that doesn't fix your problems. It gives you new ones because tools don't solve problems. Tools allow you to execute your process. It's very difficult to use a tool to give you a process. You can sign up for like Airtable and download one of their CRM templates, and then it's like, okay, how does this work? And let me model my process based around that. But that's not going to be ideal. So one thing that I usually recommend people do before jumping on a tool is go, okay, what is my process? How do I do things? And then what is it that I want this tool to actually solve for me? So is it going to do I have my really nice process right now? And all I want to do is I want to make it work a little bit better by automating steps. So if Dubsado allows you to do automated reminders of proposals being out, for example, after you send it automatically, and when they sign, it automatically creates the project and whatever, whatever it does. If that allows you to do that, and they're things that you already do, it just takes a step away from you, then that's amazing, right? That's a perfect kind of tool that you want. If it's a case of, hey, I need to figure out my processes, then before going to Dubsado or any tool, it's like, hey, let me map out how I do things normally. And let me figure out where my gaps are. Because then you're kind of going in a stronger position and you don't lose as much money. It's why I don't buy a lot of AppSumo deals, because I'm like, well, that doesn't fit in with my process. Or that's not something I do at the moment. Like, what a waste of money. I'd be investing in a bad deal probably. But yeah, so I don't buy a lot of stuff because it's like, well, is that going to make my life better or easier? Probably not. So
I mean, I 100% agree. I'm all for that lo-fi stuff. I mean, like, this is how I work, and this is literally my checklist for the day. And I still use project management tools. Yeah.
And I've got Notepad open because I couldn't find a pen.
But I remember going to a WordCamp. It was probably three, maybe 4 years ago. I think last year was like a write-off. I don't even remember if it was real, but maybe 4 years ago, went to a WordCamp and listened to someone talk about processes, and she was basically saying the same thing, that you don't need anything fancy. You can start, and this is how you do it. And it was basically just think about how you work. Think about first, identify the first things you want to actually start to document and make some change with. And then the second thing was just start writing the things out that you can think of, the big chunks, and then fill in the small chunks between it. And while she was doing the actual talk, I literally opened up paper on, which is Dropbox's note tool, and actually did my client onboarding process and just documented it in that 20 minutes. And it wasn't great, and it wasn't what I've kept, and it's been filled out, but it's like that literally in that time while she was saying, no need to go away and buy tools, no need to sort of fill out anything. But really that was like the first thing that I was like, okay, because I had no formal onboarding process. It was just like someone would ring up or they'd email and I'd be like, shit, what do I do now? So, yeah.
But there's a big difference between using your tools and your tools using you.
Yep.
Never been to match your tool. Yeah.
And sort of with that too, I mean, it's probably a little bit of the point that Nick was making, that with the tools trying to fix stuff. And I made the mistake. I made the mistake of jumping from Asana. I got comfortable in Asana. I was doing what I needed to do. Everyone was talking about ClickUp. I jumped on ClickUp and thought, this is great. I got bloated. I didn't really know what I was doing. I got behind. And I didn't need to change. I spent 3 months trying to work out a new tool. It didn't actually do anything for me. And I see it happen so much where people go, I need to, I've heard this CRM is great. I've heard this CRM is great. They chase and they chase. And really, I mean, like I said, I always come back to this. And yeah.
We forget sometimes that we're a huge audience to be marketed to. And there's a lot of products out there, and you would think that we would be immune to that kind of thing. But really, there's just a lot of things out there that are designed to take our money, just like we're sort of helping other people get money too. So I have a hard time sometimes, like, looking at new product tools and things like that and going, I really don't need that. I mean, it seems like it's great, but I really don't need that.
Yeah. Especially with the lifetime deals that they chuck around.
I just wanted to add, I agree with everything Nick was saying, what you're saying, Corey, and what the others have mentioned too. And I actually do have my process, like my workflow. That's the first thing she says, like, I'm not going to work with you unless you have your workflow. And I went through and I have my process. So it's like I have this duct tape approach. Like I use HelloSign for contracts. I have Xero, which I will not change. That's my non-negotiable. Yes. Just going to have to make it work. My accounting software. I have my branding questionnaire that goes out. So I just want, like you said, I just want something to trigger the flow.
Perfect.
So that I don't have to physically do it. Like there's always you have to set up your contact, your client, and then it's going to populate everything. So I've been at this for a while, so I know what I need. And you said it, that's exactly what I want to do. I just want something to automate my process so that it triggers A, triggers B, triggers C, triggers D, and away we go. And then it can, like, she's even actually so good that she can incorporate Zapier, like Zaps, so that I love Trello. I use Trello as my CRM, and I tried so many, like someone tried to bring me on ClickUp, and then I was like, if I know Trello and I love Trello, I'm just going to stick to Trello because I know it better than anything else. And if that's working for me, I don't need to. So like I did the same thing, and it's like so true. What you're comfortable in, that's what you should stick with, I think, because there's no point of reinventing the wheel every single time something fancy and new comes out. And so she can zap it into Trello to create me a board, to create them. So it's like, she knows her stuff. And I was like, okay, if you're going to set it up for me, but I know my workflow, then think this is what I need to stop copying and pasting and cutting and doing all that.
So judged off of what you said, you will get a ton of value out of Dubsado, because what you've defined is what a lot of people don't have. And they think that, and this is what Nick was saying, they think that the tool is going to help them with the actual problem they're having, but you've actually worked out the process. And Dubsado has, the workflows and stuff to connect this stuff together. It's probably better off for your time. Something you can explain to this person, or you've probably already spoken to them, what your process is. They'll connect it and make it happen. And you'll probably never really need to use Dubsado that much. I mean, Dubsado does some stuff like where it keeps your emails in one spot with client comms, which is really cool. And they can have a client portal. There's not a lot in the client portal, but it does give a little level of professionalism, considering that it's automated and you don't do anything. I've looked at other client portals and there's a lot of work in actually, putting the stuff in there. But Dubsado, it's like anything that they've agreed to, any form that they've filled out, any, quote that they've agreed to, any of the communications, it's all in one spot, and they can just sort of click their client portal and see that. So that was the one thing that with the client portal, it would have been nice if it had some of that, CRM, or like project management tools in there, like your Trello board or something like that. So they can clearly see where they're at. But you go.
Yeah. I feel like we're spending a lot of time talking about software and not enough time talking about the process. And in my mind, it's important to decide the process and then pick a software that helps implement that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think automation's a really big thing to talk about too. Just being able to save a lot of time with automation, and the tools are secondary because you can use a lot of different ways to automate things. But I'd really like to talk about, what part of the process can you automate once you've got it all written down? Like, what are some of the best things that you've been automating?
Me personally, or this is where we need James Rose.
Well, segue. Sorry, Sonia, I don't want to dismiss or diminish what you're saying. So I think, yeah, it's probably the Dubsado conversation's done now. There was a question, Angelita would like to discuss process around content collection, which is a very interesting topic. And big arguments and discussions are possible around, and debates are possible around the topic of content collection in the design process.
That's why I brought it up. Yeah. No, not to make y'all bicker, but honestly, my question is more about yeah, bring it on. I actually have a 7-step workbook that I use Dubsado and I use the questionnaires, and I've created a 7-step workbook that walks them from, give me everything from clarifying your message to your legal forms for your privacy policy and stuff like that, right? My question is more about are you all doing that too? Or I know, Nick, you mentioned last time we chatted that you say, here's your website, put your shit in it, and it's up to you to still.
Yeah, so look, it depends. And again, let's go back to kind of the fundamentals of it all, right? So there are different ways you can handle content in the process, especially for web design. It's a big argument. It's like design first or content first. And you know what? It friggin' depends. If you have a small, terrible client and you say, hey, get me your content and then I'll design your site, 5 years later, you're still going to be waiting for their content. So you want to make it easier for people like that. If they're not going to work with a content writer, or they're not going to work with you write their content, then design it and give them a fill in the blanks thing, and then bang, they go in and do it. If they're working,
that kind of was my question, because I have I have where it's before our project kicks off, you have to give me that completed workbook 45 days before your build dates, so that I can look over your content and absorb it, because I'm content dictates design and the people that I work with.
Yeah.
But and I also have a change, any change request, I have a cutoff date. You cannot give me a change past this date, because we're launching this shit with placeholder text. If you want to change it, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But, or I'm handing it over to you. I suppose I won't make it go live. I'm not that mean? But I guess my question is, at what point in your process, so we're talking processes, right? So you send out, your canned emails, and then you send out this workbook, and you're following up with them because you've seen that they've, like, I have this one client right now that's giving me the biggest headache because she's had the workbook for 6 months. It was like, no joke. She signed her contract 6 months ago. It was due April 23rd. Like, am I to hold her hand every month and say, hey, I noticed you haven't opened these forms yet, and you need to really be getting your content together, So last Friday, the date came and went. And so on Monday, I'm like, hey, you didn't give me your content. So your project's going to go into what I call hibernation mode. So it's just going to be, sorry, you have to reschedule because you missed your date. And that's, spelled out in the process and in the contract and all that. Right. But now she got it all together, and I'm looking it over, and I haven't said anything yet about what I'm going to do. I haven't decided. But the point being, what part of your processes do you say, no, you need to work with a copywriter, you need to, maybe this is taking us off the process track, but it's kind of part of that whole
important thing, right?
Process. Where do you scope that out to be
at the start? So at the start of the project, I speak to them about their copy and how important it is to within the site. And so there are better clients and there are worse clients. Like the clients that you had when you first started, and that they keep referring the same kinds of people, and you kind of want to stop working with them, and you slowly increase your rates on those guys, but they're usually the bottom of the barrel, cheapest websites that you do. Like for me, they're like the 4 to 6K for a site people, and they're not going to spend money on a copywriter. They're like, are you seriously going to charge me $5,000 for a website? Like, what the hell, man? So they're the kinds of people where I'm like, look, basically, this is the way it works for me. This is my process. I never time my payments to their copy. So I don't even give them access to their site to enter their copy until they've done their final payment. So no matter how I work, whether it's with a copywriter, whether it's whatever, it's for them to get access, I need my final payment. And so it will be, I do my design process, then they approve the design. Then I do the kind of build process, and they approve that it works and everything like that, and the screens work. Then I do a little bit of back-end stuff just to tidy up and whatever. And then they do their final payment, first month maintenance, care plan payment, and then they can have access to go in. I'll make it live whenever, as long as they're I'm, the site's with me and I'm maintaining it, then I'll make it live whenever. Otherwise, I'll give them a backup. They can take it wherever and update their content wherever the hell they want after I get paid. And so that's my general, most people. If they're working with a copywriter though, slightly different, right? Because then it's I need to work out with the copywriter. This comes back to that argument or the debate around content first or design first. I don't think people say content first is the way to go. I actually don't think that's the case. I think you need to figure out the flow of the site and the story you're telling. And Corey's probably got some stuff here, but right. You've got the flow of the site and what it needs to say, and you kind of have a loose idea, and then the copywriter should be doing. I should
mention the first step of that workbook has to come to me a month before the rest of it, because that's how I make my site flow. I need that piece to be able to map out.
I've had copywriters send me the copy for a site, and it's basically it's a homepage, and they're basically doing a long form sales page. And it's this is inappropriate for a homepage.
Yeah.
And then I end up having an argument with the client because it's well, I've paid this copywriter a lot of money. They're the expert in copywriting. And then I'm like, dude, I'm the expert in all this. You don't want to say that, but I kind of know what I'm doing here. The copywriter is giving you sales page copy. That's bad brief from you, bad work from them, no comprehension and no consideration of flow. And then they do it and it doesn't work out very well. And I hate them and I hate the job because it's they're doing something dumb, and I know I'm building something dumb. So that whole process of unless the copywriter is very good and they really know what they're doing and they understand how to map out site flow, and they understand how to do homepage copy versus sales page copy and stuff like that, more than likely you want to be involved in the content planning process as well. And I try to push for that. Yeah.
Essentially everything that I was going to say is that when we talk about content first versus design first, it really comes down to what you classify as design. Because really, if you're getting involved if you're just waiting for the client to give you shit and you get shit, and then you're like, now I've got to fill up a website with shit, that's what you're going to that's what you're going to get. You're going to make the nicest looking shit that you've got. That's right. But really, for me, I consider the first stage as design still. The way that I work, I've removed doing like traditional, the high, the mid fidelity wireframes. I've removed that from my process. What I essentially do now though is have a content map, and what that essentially will have is really, really, really crazy low fidelity. So it doesn't look like any design. It's just basically has a chunk, and this says this type of content, this type of content. And what I actually say down the side of that is what the intention is and what mode the person is in while they're in that part. So, in the header, they're in discovery mode. In here, they're in like, digesting mode. Down the bottom, they're in like, so, and
pain
that's
points,
what decision
assurance, all of that. I do that too.
Yeah. And the great thing with that is like, it helps you dictate the content. So you're kind of designing the content still then. The other thing too is it's like a lot of that stuff is very generic. So, you're dealing with the same sorts of businesses. You can kind of keep that, and it never looks like design, but it means you can kind of talk about the content first. So I think that's one of the things when I kind of get my ears prick up when people say content versus design, what one goes first. And it's like, well, both. They're kind of going at the same time, but really it starts with a conversation around what the content is. And design to me is creative thinking. So I think developers are designers because they're solving problems creatively. And that's the same thing. If you're talking about content and how it's got to work for you, that's still design in my head. Not graphic design, not visual design, but it's still.
Sure. No, I think I suppose I should have said more like, it's about like not getting those, not even getting like your services. Like I need to know what you're offering. You need to at least spell that out for me so I know like, oh, these are the, I can start putting kind of it together. Like, like I said, like pain points, assurance, trust, like, no, all that kind of stuff. And that's part of my design is, this is my about page for this type of, industry. And this is my, it's kind of similar. Right. And then I have them like piece it in, but as far as the roadmap goes, like, I still need those pieces to be able to get myself to that point. And so working with a copywriter or not, like there's got to be a point in the process where you just say, time out, your shit is shit. And we got to move on from this. I hate to say it that way, but it's like, you're not a copywriter. I'm not a copywriter. You're not paying me to be a copywriter. And we need something better than what you're providing, or else this website's just going to suck. And I'm not a fan of creating crap for the taking up space on the internet. I want it to actually, be profitable for them.
Yeah,
but
that's a sales meeting thing, right? So setting expectation and setting how you work and why you work and what your values are is something you do. Copy on the website and what you say in your sales meeting. Don't sign clients if they're not, I guess, really like, yeah, I get this. Yeah, 100%. I agree. Everything you're saying, let's do this, whatever. So all my processes have evolved from shit going wrong, right? Like a client like, disappearing for 4 years and me not being able to bill my final because I haven't provided the copy that I need to chuck into the site is why I don't time my payments to copy. Like I've still got like a couple of grand outstanding technically because never hit the terms where I could get that money. And they're just not providing content, and I'm chasing up. It's been 5 years. I'm like, yeah, I think this is done. But they always like, oh man, I'll get it to you next month. Like 5 years later, they'll get it to me next month. It's like,
so I was going to say just around the idea of, my process with content, and it's purely become, I've come up with this idea just because I had so many problems around it. And it was before, again, I think it's kind of goes hand in hand with some of that stuff around software versus trying to fix the problem. There's stuff like Content Snare, and I've made a note here that James Rose, who has Content Snare, is definitely someone we need to get on board to have a conversation, because a lot of people will get value from how to run that. Now, my process around content is actually super, super lazy. And it's just to get people to, have the content first. And it's like with brand strategy and like paid discoveries, the way that I get people to have a copywriter on board is I ask them at the start, do you have this? It's like with a brand strategy, you ask them about their stuff. If they can't answer some question, that's like, I can't do a visual identity because you can't answer these things. These are core things. So I can't just do your logo. We've got to stop and go back to this. If you just want a logo and you want something crap, just go to Fiverr, that's fine. But if you want to do this properly, you can't answer these big, important questions. So we need to go back. So it's the same thing. You're talking to someone about content and do you have content? Do you know what you know what you need to have in there? Do we have these things? No, I don't. Well, we're going to have to do a paid discovery. We're going to have to get a copywriter on that. I don't want to spend the money. It's like, well, you don't understand how hard it is to write content. You don't know how hard it is to actually work out what content we need. I'm not the person to help you out. And I mean, that's the only way that I found out that works for me. So I mean, there's other ways for people, because everyone works with different types of clients and have different processes. So I feel like there's a big conversation around that content snare type of stuff, like some actual small processes to make people, chase them up and make that stuff happen. But for me, it's not a big part of the conversation, because I'm like, do you have content? And it's like, if they don't have content, it's like, we need a copywriter. Sometimes they have content, or they like, we've got an existing website. That's most of the time. And it's like, okay, so if you've got an existing website, what you can do is go, well, let's look at what you've got and what we need to improve, and work out like if we need, a copywriter to get this extra stuff done. That to me that's a different conversation. If you've got someone that's fresh, or someone leaving, I saw a wave.
No, Trish has a hand up in the air.
Oh,
I think she's like 4 questions.
Go Trish, go.
Yes, I get this before even a sales meeting. I get it in my inquiry form that I get people to fill out, and this is actually one of the processes I do religiously follow, and it helps that it's written down in a form. And I have this question. Is the content for your new website prepared yet? And then the options are, yes, we can reuse existing content. Yes, it's ready to go. It's in progress. A copywriter is working on it now. We're going to need some help with this and other. I don't know why I have other there in case someone needs to get creative, I guess. But yeah, that's even before I talk to them, I know where their content's at. And I don't like starting without seeing at least the first drafts of the copy written, because I do design the content.
Is that part of your onboarding, or is that still in the
that's the
preliminary questionnaire?
Yeah. When someone says, hey, I'm interested, I send them I call it a website project planner, and it's one of the questions. So I want to know straight up, are you just thinking about it, or is everything ready to go? And I have a copywriter that I work with, and he refers me a lot of business. So she makes life a lot easier, and I'll refer people to her if they don't know what they're doing.
Very good. I think we need to get Trish's, sales sort of process happening. I think that sounds pretty good. It's better than mine. So does anyone have anything specific that they kind of want to ask about processes, or any point where they're struggling, or Trey?
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about someone's client onboarding process. I've heard a lot of talk about it, but mainly for me, it's just like, you're my client. Here's, give me money. Here's the deposit. Like, let's do this work. So I'd like to know more about like what people are doing in terms of onboarding their client, what that process looks like.
Nothing for me. I don't do anything. I'll just carry on the conversation by email and slowly get what I need when I need it. I don't know what people are doing for onboarding, and I think maybe I'm missing something, but it's working for me.
I think what you described then, Trish, is probably what 90% of people would see as an onboarding process. It really, I know that's sort of a part of the sales process, but I think a lot of people, they're not doing that. And I mean, if you want to talk about a little bit more about some of the stuff that you have in that, because I think people could introduce that in their pre-sales, in that sales sort of cycle, but they could also introduce that after that sales cycle to become a part of their, so you get someone on board and then say, hey, I need to find out all this stuff. Different ways of doing the same thing. But what other stuff are you sort of going through in there? You know,
well, it's long because it weeds people out.
And
if they fill this out and it's serious. But yeah, I'll ask about decision makers because you don't want to find that out in the last minute when the committee comes in and overthrows everything. Why you need a new website, what does success look like, your budget, and I've got a list of ranges for what, actually Nick helped me with this, a strategic website, a business website, a professional website, and a starter website, which are all just made up things, and they just have price ranges to go with them. The deadline, because I want to know that up front, if it's open-ended or, you know, it needs to be in 3 weeks' time, I just can't do it in 3 weeks, sorry. If you have an existing website already, who's it for, what are their motives? Then the content question, exactly how many pages will the new website have? That's a revealing question because people don't really know that, but you need to know that. So that's a discussion to have. Then just about branding, competitors, other sites you like, and anything else. So, and that basically gives me everything I need for a proposal. So I don't even really do a sales call, which is something I'm working on. Yeah.
So looking at
so Corey, you
after.
said,
sorry.
Oh
yeah.
No, I was going to say, Corey said client onboarding as if it were a step after they've already gone through the funnel.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Of what Trisha's describing, right?
So
what does that look like?
So for me, client onboarding is kind of the whole lot, right? It's essentially from that sales part, and whether and my approach is probably more similar to Nick, where I'm, you know, very much, you know, on a call, on a chat, in a meeting, so, you know, initial 5-10 minute call, and if it's going to convert, you know, or go further, a proper meeting. But really, my onboarding process is it's a lot more manual, and it's stuff that's pre-organized, and essentially have like a little welcome kit, and I have essentially what my processes are, so people can see where they're at. And it's essentially explaining that in the initial call, what my process is, and letting people, I guess, have an idea. You've moved to the next stage, you've moved to the next stage. And it's just like, well, this is the pre-sale stuff. Now we're in sort of, you know, we know that we're going to work together. This, you know, or there's a formal proposal. Then if we go ahead, it's this. We'll have a kickoff sort of meeting. And there's like a welcome pack that basically says these are the steps that happen. It's not a lot of stuff in there. It's not like super fluffed out. It's just giving someone an idea of what to expect. And I think that comes back to, as well, one of your very first points around having processes, Trey, which was sort of establishing that trust and making the client go like, I have a process, you're not going to run this. So it's just probably essentially what you're doing, but putting it down on paper. And then I've designed it so it looks, it's okay. It's not that it's not that fancy, but it's just a little you know, couple page PDF that just says these are the things that we do. And a lot of the stuff is repeated. So in my conversation, I'll say, this is the process, these are the steps. This is my working process. This is the actual steps in a project. And then when it gets to the quote, those steps are basically outlined, and those stages in a project are outlined. And then when it gets through, it's like more formalized, and then until we get actually starting on the project. So there's the kickoff, and but once a quote's been accepted, there's like a, you know, greeting email, like, awesome, we're going to be working together with, you know, this basic outline of the steps that we have in and where we're at. And then we'd have like a kickoff meeting and actually start that stuff. So.
Yeah. So, so you send proposal, right? So Trey, you're asking about after they sign the proposal / contract, you know, they've committed. So if I look at what I'm doing, there's things that I do that are internal stuff for me, and there's things that I do that are external stuff for them. So internal stuff is things like I set them up in my project management system. I make sure in the accounting software that the invoice is set up if it didn't happen automatically from the proposal software. So Better Proposals automatically allows them to pay. If they pay, fantastic. I don't really give a shit about the accounting software. It's going to come in, I'll just allocate it then. If they don't, and I need to send an invoice, then I send an invoice. I'll set them up in my project management system, which at the moment is ClickUp, and I'm probably going to change it. And then I'll do a couple other things as well. So I'll do something like sending them an email to schedule the first meeting. So I'm big on avoiding a lot of work in the sales meeting. I don't want to talk to them too much about specifics, like design specifics and things that they want, because I don't really give a shit. What I want is like what the outcomes are going to be, what they're trying to achieve, and kind of a little bit about their target market, just touching on it enough so I can sell. And then after that, then we have the actual, like Corey said, the kickoff meeting, which is where we actually run through specifics. This is like specific features, target audience. We go deep on it, ask a lot of questions, and figure out what else I'm going to need from them as part of that process before I can start doing anything. I'll have some good ideas from the sales meeting, like based on how we talk about stuff. Do they have a brand? Because I'm going to find out if they don't have a brand, then I need to recommend branding. If they don't have copy, I need to recommend a copywriter. And I do that in my sales process. And then we work out from that, I work out what my next steps are going to be. Hopefully it's pretty basic. Like they've already got a brand sorted and it's good enough. The copy is either something they already have copy on their site, which is okay. Or I'm going to manage their copy, which makes it even easier for me. And then our first meeting is talking about audience specific stuff. So it's comes down to that point. That's my onboarding is that. Then like you have people who are very different to that, who actually do it very professionally, not like me. And that's someone like Angelita, who I imagine has a very good onboarding process. I'm very excited to hear about it. And so that's my nice seg and putting it on the spot.
Nice. Well, we all know I have a really good offboarding, right? We all learned that I like to graduate them away from my inbox at the end. But
I want it. I want that, and I need that now, Angelita.
Yeah. I actually just sent one last week. My post-launch packet. It's this whole thing. But my onboarding is pretty similar to you, Nick, in the sense that I have the stuff I do internal and I have the stuff I do external. I need to be better about asking the harder questions. I think we had a chat once about, I think maybe the first brief where we talked about getting down to price a little bit more distinctively. I need to be better about that in my onboarding instead of, I'm Italian, so I talk a lot and I should probably listen more or ask more questions that they give me deeper answers than just nods of heads. But I am similar to you, Trisha. I have a form that they fill out in the very beginning just to get like in my stratosphere. And then, and we have very similar questions. I was just looking at yours because you linked it. That was so kind. I actually am going to update my copywriting now that we've had this chat about, because I ask like just yes or no. Do you have your copy ready to go? Yes or no? And that does not help me in the least.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way.
I usually find out during the call though. So my calls are a lot longer. Like you don't have calls for Nick and we do calls. So I do, I don't know if you guys know Melissa Love from Design Space Co. And Design Space, right? Marketing Fix, all that. Yep. She did a call once that was talking about the art of the sales call and what her processes are. And so I kind of adopted that a little bit. And I used to use Christine Thatcher's Designing to Delight. That was back like 2016, I want to say. It feels about right. So that's kind of where I started, and it just evolved from there. So I start with the form, and then I build from there. I'm trying to look for the. I'll see if I could pull up that art of the sales call kind of script, because that's kind of where I go really more deep. But I should ask more questions that they have to answer. And like we talked before, get straight to the point of like, how do you make your money and what does that really look like for you? So, but does that answer your question? I know you asked me like, you tell me your process. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll tell you. And then I didn't tell you. No, I do a welcome. I'm sorry, I should be like more discreet. So onboarding does go from, they fill out this form on my website and then they get into my system, and then we get on the call, and then we have the call, and then I send a proposal and a contract. And once I have a contract, I have an initial payment that is non-refundable to schedule to get like on my calendar. And then it kicks off, they get the welcome packet. They don't get the welcome packet from me. I mean, I have we talk about my process at length during the call, but they don't get my process really in writing until they start seeing that proposal. That might be kind of where my hiccup is a little bit too, because I talk a lot and I talk fast. So maybe they're not quite catching it all during the call too. So I could probably make a change there. And then once they do the welcome packet, the next thing is grabbing all their client details. So they go right into LastPass and they start giving me all their, setting up users for me to get into all their systems. And I'd prefer they make me a user and not give me their passwords, even though LastPass allows that. And then I do, it goes right into like the design preferences and really deeper into their goals. We talk about their goals a lot in the sales call because that determines if I even want to make a proposal in the first place. But we do talk a lot more in depth in their goals. I really want your goals. I want to know at the end of this, when this launch, what does a success look like for you? And I want you to write it down. I don't want you to just tell me in a sales call. I want you to tell me, like, this is what I expect to happen, so that I know in the end of the day, when I meet that goal, I'm making a legit like client and happiness, and everybody's happy all around. But then also I'm checking my own box, like I did my job, and then they go into like getting their copy and stuff for me. Does that answer your question, Trey and Nick, about my onboarding? That's my onboarding. I suppose it's more than onboarding, because now it's like onboarding client of mine process. Yeah.
Well, I was just looking at, both looked at Trisha and Trey's website as I posted the links. I think people are going to go crazy over your link, Trish. That's great. So thank you for sharing. I'll post that in the group for sure if you're comfortable with that. But I was going to say, Trey, you know what you've got there. That's almost similar to what I was sort of saying about what I do. You've got like your actual, what I would say, your personal process, like how you work, and then you've almost got it like listed as stages, like your schedule. Like this is actually the parts that we're going through. So like one is how you work and how you think about your work, where you've got like I don't know, and then but where you've got that actual schedule, it's sort of breaking that down into phases. And that's the sort of thing where I guess I have this internal stuff that I'm talking almost like a bit salesy, where it's sort of helping me differentiate myself. And then there's like letting someone understand where they're at. And some of the things that I probably didn't point out, which they just seemed like a given, but in that sort of stuff where you're sending like a welcome email, that's sort of giving people access. Like if you're going to have a Trello board or something like that, that's when you want to introduce those things. So you're doing them at a set time and a set process, rather than just going, oh shit, I need to do that. Like I need to get that information now, I better send it. So if you kind of can make a system where you don't have to think about that sort of stuff. So it's the same as like Angelita was saying about getting people's passwords and that sort of stuff. Like I talk about getting people's domain access and that sort of stuff at the start of a project, rather than the last week when you actually need access. And then they tell you that they're hosted with something terrible, or they don't have access to their domain name, and you're like, oh no. So you start that conversation early.
So there's
part of the reason I asked. Oh, sorry, Nick. Part of the reason I asked too is because it feels like it would be really easy to over process something. And like now you've got this, you've got this intake form, and now you've got this onboarding thing, and then you send in this email, and then they've got to fill out a creative brief, and then now they've got a pre-lunch checklist, and now they've got a content checklist. And it's like, I can imagine a lot of my clients being like, F this, like this is too much homework. I can't do all this.
So I was going to say that actually almost about when Angelita was saying, we have somewhat a similar process. Like a lot of those steps, I was like, yep. And one of the things that she said, which I do totally the opposite. And I think this is really important to understand with any process, right? Like we all work differently. And this is where we've sort of mentioned, and Sonia dropped off, but she was sort of saying about starting with your own sort of what way that you work rather than software, and trying to, and Nick sort of talked about sort of having software sort of try and solve your problems. But I've lost my train of thought a little bit. Well, that's terrible. I hate that.
You're just saying opposite of Angelita.
Oh, that's it.
Saying
Thanks,
that
Nick.
You don't over process your stuff. Like you're not quite as over processed.
Yeah, well, maybe I still probably do. Maybe, but what I was going to say is I'm a little less on the client doing homework, and I do homework, especially around the brief. And this is where it's 100% the opposite of what you do. You said that you make clients like write out the things that the questions, whereas I'm doing the opposite. I'll get on a call and I'll make them answer the questions. And what I'm doing in that conversation is listening for the things that they're not telling me, and listening to the things that I want to object to. And for example, you say, oh, so who are your client base? And I'll say, oh, it's like young mums. And you're like, why? You know, like how do we know? Is there any low hanging fruit? Are there people that we're not, is it just because you're marketing to them? Like, you know, and you have people that said, oh, I remember doing stuff for a t-shirt brand and they look like tattoo stuff. And they said, oh, we do stuff for kids. And I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, we get really, really good engagement on Facebook about it. And I'm like, why? And what we found out is that early on, they did some promotions where they did like kids onesies and gave them away to get some publicity. And now that became their market, but it's not really who they're trying to be. So then they're trying to market to someone that isn't really their customer. Anyway, so what I'm doing in those conversations is actually, I don't write anything. They don't write anything. We talk, and I'm looking for stuff that I don't like or that I think might be wrong. And then as a part of that discovery process, I'm going away and creating the brief for them and saying, you read through this and you're approving this whether or not I've heard everything right. Because to me, and this is part of my sales process, and it really helps actually convert I have a reasonably high ticket price. And I say to people that this discovery process is actually about information exchange. I understand marketing, I understand brand, I don't understand your business, and I don't understand your customers. So we've got to exchange information. Now, if I tell you all this stuff and then you write it down and give me a brief, we're making the presumption that I understood everything. But if we do it the other way around, you tell me everything that you know and I write it down, then you're approving the fact that I am on the right path. That's the quickest and easiest way to know that we're, you know, heading in the right direction. So that's just the way that I work. I'm not saying, oh, don't do that, but I just thought it was quite funny because we've got very similar steps, but that's somewhere where I do the opposite and I take the homework away from the client.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I misunderstand what you're saying about the homework that I have them doing. I mean, I have them map out their goals because I could set goals for them, but those aren't necessarily what they're coming to the table with.
Yep.
I mean, and I have them like write out copy, but I don't say like, I need, you know, I'm not going to copy paste this from this, you know, I need like a general idea of what your, you know, what are the pain points of your people? Like, I don't know your people. I don't know every single business there is of all the clients I've ever worked with to know, like, here's how I speak to your people, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess I wouldn't say that we're necessarily completely different, you know.
I think it's more the digging. So I'm similar to Corey. Is I don't like people just giving me an answer because usually their answers are shit. They don't know. They're not marketing people. They have no idea. And you know what? A lot of businesses, they don't even think about this stuff that much. So what happens is they'll say something. I'll let's say, hey, who's your target audience? And I say, oh, well, we generally work with business owners in Norwest region, right? Cool. What kind of business owners? Like, well, I don't know, like business owners that need tinting on their office windows. So people with offices. Yeah, cool. What kind of offices? It's like, oh, well, they're usually in these kinds of buildings, whatever. And so you start like, you can drill down a lot more. Yeah. Versus the answer they would give is usually going to be low quality. And so that's with everything, not just who their audience is, like things that they want, their goals. You know, it's like, what do you want? I want more leads. Why? Well, because if I get more leads,
I get into that. Like I'm about to tomorrow, I'll have a call with a client whose project's kicking off in a few months, and I've gotten all their content and I've gotten all their various onboarding forms up until that point. And that's when I really drill down, but it's verbal, you know, I don't necessarily write it down. It's just to make sure that like,
I think that's probably the only point that I was trying to say that we're different in. Really, it's that you're getting people to, and same with Trish. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I think Trish's example is amazing, and I think so many people are just going to, you know, their eyes are going to bug out of their head when they look at that. But it's just that for what I do is I'm doing a lot of the work. So when I'm in the call with the client, for example, I don't talk at all. I ask a couple of questions and I shut the hell up. I just let them all the stuff. They're doing like 90% of the talking. And then after that, I'm doing like 95% of the writing, and then they're approving that writing. So I don't make people go away and fill out a form and I think there's benefits in both, right? I'm not saying like superior, you know, inferior. I'm saying understand who your client is and how you want to work. And so for me, that's what I'm saying. It's very similar, like what we're doing, but it's almost like I'm taking some of that work away from the client, just in actually just being the person that types it up. Yeah.
Yep. I missed the point when you were making, but now I got it. But yeah, no, I'm really A-type, and I know that I have to be able to shut off and walk away and take care of family and life and be able to then come back and have it all right here, or else I'll have sleepless nights or soap moments in the shower.
Yeah. And you know what? That's one of the biggest points with doing like this sort of hive mindy sort of stuff, is that there's not one person that's saying like, hey, this is how you do this, and if you don't do this, you're stupid. Because like we all have different lives, we all have different types of ways of working. And I think we're all hearing different stories that we can probably, there's stuff that you guys have said that I can pull from, and there's stuff that people might have heard that I've said that like, that's something that I would implement, but maybe not. And that's okay. I think as long as we're all sort of sharing stuff that we know that works, that's the key thing.
We've got
Corey, I think, sorry, Nick.
That's right, go
on. The difference between your technique and my technique with those questions is that mine are written and yours are spoken. So with my form, I'm just asking questions and not giving anything back. I guess I like my clients to be the type who like writing, because for the longest time, I've had a very big aversion to phone calls and Zoom. So I did everything by email, and I worked out how to get the information without ever having to talk to them or see them. But I'm changing that now. I've got a Zoom call this afternoon where I'm going to be doing the form in person, not in person, in Zoom.
Nice.
But yeah,
the
whole idea is to get the information, but mine's the written version of what you do. I think
the other thing too that I want to point out, where I see that there's benefits in each, and the real benefit with what you're doing when you're using a form is, and we talked about this last week, it ties to that tie kicker thing, right? Like you're helping someone evaluate who they are. And for me, I'm trying to stop my tie kickers from coming because of stuff like how I position myself, because of price. If someone's willing to pay what I want to charge, like they can be a jerk, you know, like people complain about clients being jerks and stuff. It's like, if you're going to pay me enough, like, and you're gonna listen to how I want to work, you can be a jerk all you want. Not that I want to work with jerks or I'm advocating that, but you know what I'm saying, like
jerks.
But also a lot of the clients that I work with, because I have a niche. No, they're the worst.
My niche are jerks.
Oh, I remember that comment that you made, Trish, in a conversation we were having before, that we were talking about niching, and you said that these days being nice is a niche. I love that. But I was going to say just quickly about my niche. I specifically work with people that are often in like industrial construction, people that do stuff for councils, you know, the people that build bridges. And if I do stuff for landscapers, they're not like people that do people's front yards, they're the people that do the nature strips down the roads and those sorts of things, put in palms and those types of things. Those people that run those businesses, they're not going to do the work. And no. But I know that they're good for it. I know that they're good for the money, and I know that they're willing to pay for someone else to do the work. So that's where, like, saying, I can't work with you if you've got a copywriter. I can't work with you if you're not going to follow this. And that's the same thing. So you're again, it comes down to verbal versus a form. Your form is doing some of those things that says, go away, you're not right. And I'm just doing them with words. And yeah, so I think there's definitely, you know, they're trying to achieve the same goal. They're just sort of taking them a different step, a different path.
There's two more things that we kind of need to run through that have popped up in chat. So one is offboarding and one is feedback. But before we move, is there anything that anyone would like to add about onboarding process?
No.
I just have one little quick thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I might interrupt you.
No.
My process, and I'm still streamlining, it's kind of in between where I kind of ask a lot on the call, then give them what I call a project notes document, fill out the things that I can, and then get them to fill it in. Then I have another call to go through it all. So that I find really helpful. And what I found helpful is, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but as soon as they've paid the deposit, I give them as much info as I can, because I find that that's when they're most motivated. So with my deposit confirmation email, it's like, thank you so much, so excited to get started. Here's all the info. All right, here is the project notes document we've talked about. Jump in here, start popping in information. Here is your shared file. Start chucking in any logos, images, copy that you have, ideas, inspiration files, anything like that. Here's my link to book our project kickoff call. Make sure this is booked for a couple of days before we've set to start. And I need your project notes document at least 50% full by the time we chat. And I found that that's really helpful to get them while the hot, I guess. they've just paid this money, they're keen to make it work. And it's something I wasn't doing, but I've just found that, yeah, getting that straight to them once they've paid that invoice is the best time for me to get that, because otherwise I'm just constantly chasing them because it becomes another project, another task.
I think everyone was absolutely nodding when you said that. It's probably like the best and easiest tip of the day. I think that people are most motivated at the start.
Yeah. It's one of those things that seems so obvious, but now I'm kind of like, oh, makes such a difference. It's so good. And I'm a little bit kind of, I guess, low tech in that I just do a Google Doc, a shared Google Doc that we can keep updating. I put in all of the pages that we've mentioned, and then I put them in headlines and have a little heading that says, please make any notes about these specific pages, whether it's functionality, whether it's style, whether it's copy, whether it's an example of a site that has a page about this that you like. And I've found that really helpful, that I've put in the pages as headings, and they can make specific notes rather than just general, oh, I kind of like this site or I like that site. That's a recent thing that I've done, but I found it really helpful. And I put in some notes from our call as well to give them examples of the types of information I'm looking for. Yeah.
That sounds almost between the two extremes.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle there. I kind of I get all the info, I put it into the doc, but then I get them to fill it out. We have another call that kind of goes over it all. And the clients I work with are smaller, generally aren't entirely sure what they're doing. So I find that I'm doing a bit more hand holding, but it works for me.
Oh, don't you worry, my clients have no idea what they're doing either.
All right,
so something like that.
I wanted to just clarify, Lily, you asked about feedback. Were you talking about like design feedback during the process? Or are you talking about feedback on the project, like in terms of testimonials and reviews?
Both.
Both. Cool.
In that question, I was asking about customer feedback of like when they're nitpicking everything that you've done.
Got you. Okay, cool.
Do you know what though, Nick? I think this one is actually so big that we need a whole dedicated thing to feedback. I reckon if we try and smash through this in 5 minutes, we're not going to do it justice.
I can smash it.
You do it. But
I'll give you a brief outline, and then
we'll
can go
definitely
into
do
detail,
a full.
right?
We'll definitely do a full show on it. But you go.
Design feedback. Minimizing design feedback is one of the keys of success in design. I don't care what anyone else says, right? Because I've seen ugly designs go through and get approved, and I've seen amazing designs get absolutely friggin' destroyed from clients. So it starts at the start, like with how you position yourself and what you talk to them about. And if you're there to do what they say, you're going to end up having a lot of design feedback because you're not the expert. They are. You're just doing the design work that they can't actually do, right? So number one is positioning yourself. Number two is focusing on the story of what you're designing and what the outcome is intended to be. And so if you get their goals and their goals are conversions, then you design everything based around conversions. And when you explain your design to them and your design choices, you tie it back to the conversions. And you move it away from their personal taste and you move it away from their emotional connection. So I don't work with people who are generally, I've got one and it's a friggin' nightmare. I don't work with clients who are emotionally invested in the design itself. Like if they come to me and say, I've got this vision of what it's going to be, it's like, no. Because I'm going to hate you.
I'm a bit of an artist myself.
Yeah, I'm creative. I'm this new.
I used to be a designer. Thank you.
No. So I work with people who they don't really care. They just want it to look good. And they might come back with design feedback sometimes. And it's usually I could smash it, like crush that down very quickly. And so you've got the way you design is around the objectives and meeting objectives. You generally don't take their input. You have a general idea at the start of how it's going to be. And then when you present, this is the big one, is when you present, you don't just send them a link or an image or something to look at. You show them whether that's in person or whether that's on a Zoom call or whether worst case you're doing like a walkthrough, like a screen recording. And you go, before you do anything, like Corey actually told me one trick, which was really useful, is if you're redesigning something, you show them what they had before to set the stage. So this is what you had before. And the reason why we're changing is because you want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so what we're doing now is I'm going to show you what we've done to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to explain everything. And then bang, you open up the design and you start walking through it and you explain things as you go. And there's things that you know they're going to like try to argue about. And so you address that when you're doing the presentation. So we've done this because of blah. We've done this because of blah. We've done this because of blah. And so the overall effect is whatever. And this will help achieve this because of that. And then you go, like you send them that video. And then when they go through it, like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because you've told them a story, it's very hard for them to go, oh, you know what? I want that to be like a circle instead of a square. It's like, okay, why do you want that?
Yeah, so the reason I asked was for, I just got a 20-page, they had like printed out pages written down with a pen and scanned it and emailed it back to me. So I was kind of wondering what you're like, you do it in a meeting?
At that stage, I would have just killed myself. That's kind of a too late scenario. And I have had that happen. Actually, this client now who's very emotionally attached, that kind of was happening with them. And that was because from the start, they said, this is what we want. We have this vision. And they gave me sites they liked. They gave me whatever. And I hate when they start giving me sites they like. Instead, I kind of want to go, okay, cool. What are you trying to achieve? And what's the vibe that we're going for? And then I'll say, here are some examples of stuff in the wild that kind of fits in with that thing. And we pick a direction. And then based on direction, I'll do concepts. And so I don't want them telling me what they want because they've got a vision in their head that they're never going to be able to get to you exactly. You're never going to be able to read their mind and recreate what they really want. And what they really want, they don't even know what they really want. Like they, whatever. And so that's why they're nitpicking everything. And so in that case, I'll just tell you what I did with that. I sat there and went, okay, cool. There's a lot of feedback here. It's obvious this design completely missed the mark and it's not working. And I actually went extreme with this because I was really unhappy with how everything had progressed to this point. So I was like, nah, I'm taking control again. I said, look, I think it's obvious that something went wrong here in this process. What I think we should do is I think we should go back a step and start again with the initial design meeting. And let me basically do my job and run you through what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and let's figure out together how we're going to get to that point, with the design. And so then I sat down and I actually just redid my entire process because I didn't do it the first time properly because I had someone else in my business back then and they were kind of involved. And so I sat down with them, I asked the questions, I recapped what we'd already discussed about with the brief. And I said, this is what all of these things mean. This is what we need to have. So, you gave me a couple of designs you liked before. That's great, but they don't actually fit this goal. So here's what I think works for this goal. And we've got to pick a direction out of these 3 things. There are 3 directions you can go in from a design standpoint. Pick one. And that's the extent of the freedom I gave them. And then that worked out really well.
I've got a ton of stuff to say, but I don't want to say too much because I really do think we want to dedicate a full thing to this. But sort of I think Nick said all of the stuff that I would say. There's a couple of things that I would want to just point out real quickly. With problems when you're sort of showing people stuff. One of the real important things to do is raise objections before someone else does. So that's why you say, like, I did this because of this. And then that stops people saying, like, have you tried yellow? Like you say, I did. Like, you don't just say, oh, I like green. Or you don't just say, this is green. You say, this is green to tie in with this stuff. And that, because you've said this, we've identified these things, whether it's a color or a functionality or whatever we're talking about. So raising a problem so that they don't shoot you down, because it's really hard to defend yourself. Someone says, like, why did you do that? It's different to saying, like, I did this because of this reason. If you're on the back foot, it's really hard to sort of get that. So yeah, another thing I wanted to say is, there's a lot of stuff you can do around framing in these conversations. Again, if you're going to do this stuff live, like with someone, like a Zoom call, you do stuff before you actually even show them. And like Nick said, if I'm doing someone's brand and they think their brand is shit, their old brand, I'm putting that as the first thing. So they're hit with an ugly stick, and they're like, oh. The next thing they're going to see is heading towards progress. The other thing you've got to do is around framing. And again, this is like raising objections before they come up. And so with branding, I'll tell people, like, don't expect to like go, oh my God, I love this. This is because that doesn't mean that that's it's bad. If you look at it and you go, oh, I'm not sure, it might actually be amazing. It's like some of the best movies, some of the best songs, they take 10 listens to listen to before you get them. They're hard. And just because something is easy for you to like doesn't mean that it's wrong. Just because something is hard for you to like doesn't mean that it's, you know, wrong. It might be the right thing. So that's really important. And I got one last point.
There's a great blog by Sagi Haviv about the first time you look at a logo, what they do when they show logos.
I reference that all the time.
Anyway, look it up.
I reference that all the time.
Yeah, me too.
That's a great one. Yeah.
That's another one to post the link for. We've got a YouTube video. We got lots of stuff today. The last thing I wanted to say, and this sounds a little bit sneaky, and everything else I think has sounded really noble, like what Nick was talking about and what I was trying to say around raising objections and framing is they're sort of nice and noble things. This one sounds a little bit more sneaky, but it really is just mirroring people, right? It's really important to use the same language as them. So if you have a conversation or, you know, when they fill out a form or whatever you do, whatever language they use, you chuck that back at them. So you try and talk like them. You use the same. If they call their customers patrons, if they use words like innovative, even though they're like stuck in the past, it doesn't matter. You don't try and use your words. You use their words, and you actually, you know, mold yourself a little bit to them when you're actually talking through what you do. So it sounds sneaky, but I think it really, really does actually help. What was the last thing? Offboarding.
So
I'm not going to do that. Angelita's got the best offboarding process that we know.
Well, let's give it some context, right? Let's do the comparison. So offboarding. So basically, job has finished. Let's say it's a website and you've gone live. What do you do after going live, right? So it's like you kind of sit there, right? And it's like you got to let them know something. So usually you're going to send an email. At the very least, you need to notify them that, hey, here's where we're at. This is done. Basically, my bit is done with the site itself, unless you have some sort of, you know, change period where they can request stuff over the next 7 days or whatever, 14 days. So you're going to send some sort of an email. Me personally, I send them an owner's manual. So I have a website owner's manual. I bought it from the admin bar. It's like 30, 40 bucks, whatever. Customize it for the client. I fill in what I can.
I have a group discount.
It does have a group discount.
I'll post that as well. All the links.
And I send that. And I used to send something similar before, but it was just a lot shitter. So this is a lot better. And so it's pretty in-depth. It covers a lot of the maintenance activities. Now, every client goes on a care plan with me. It's generally, I don't get people not going on care plans these days. But if I ever don't, I'm sending that for sure, because they're going to jump on a care plan after that. And so that runs through all the maintenance stuff that I'm going to be doing. If I am, my name's there. And I ask them to look at it. And if there's any gaps, like anything that hasn't been filled out, I ask them to fill it out and send it back to me. And then I follow up like a month later. I set them up in my maintenance system, which is Manage WP. I make sure that I've set up any recurring billing if I haven't already, which I usually have at that stage. I put them into, I started doing this and I didn't finish the process, but basically I started building out an offboarding sequence of emails. So first one is like a couple of days later saying, hey, you know, you went live with the site. Here's some things that you can do to kind of share it, promote, whatever. Then there's another one saying, hey, you know, like the review request. And then there's another one a little bit later around, you know, how's it all going? Are you happy with your traffic? Have you considered like methods of growing your traffic as well? Like, so, and then I'm kind of positioning for SEO and other services that I offer. And then another step in the process is actually creating the case study. Like, so, you know, whether it's the testimonial, putting a testimonial on your site, whether it's adding them to your portfolio, or whether it's actually writing for a proper case study, something like that. So update to your site, because the people who do that regularly, like, they're usually really like on the ball with their business and they're doing really well. So, you know, mine are terrible. Like, I think I created like 3 just to have a custom post type for case studies, and then I never really finished them. And so they're like really like almost empty. And it's one of those things I keep meaning to go back to, but the difference between people who win and people who don't are the people go back to it, like, and they actually do it and they follow through. So that's a good one. And then just make sure anything you need to do from a technical standpoint in your systems. So create them as a client in your project management system, like update them in the CRM and everything. Trey, you're heading off. Good night.
See you, Troy. Well, after that, like between Nick and Angelita, I got nothing around that, so I'm cracking the shits. No, but really the only other thing that I was going to say is a good thing to do is give yourself like with everything that Nick just said. The good thing with that is if you do that once, it's a rinse and repeat job. So if you can, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this stuff. It's rinse and repeat. That really is something that's the same for every single client. The other thing that I have, it took me a long time to do, is just to send reminders to actually catch up with people. And what I don't do any slimy, like, hey, have you considered this? What I try and do is just find content and bookmark stuff to send to people, that relates to their business. And it's just like, hey, I thought of you. But that's something that I didn't do for a long time. It's just a way to keep top of mind and keep a relationship going. That isn't like, you should buy something from me. You should buy something from me. It just means like, and especially when COVID, that stuff started to happen, just reaching out to people and sending people stuff that were happening with their industries from like hairdressers to work with some people in hospitality, and just sending them stuff like, wow, have you seen this? The response that I got from that was really positive, and I wasn't trying to make sales out of that situation, but what it does is strengthen the relationship. So that's just a little tiny thing to add on. I mean, I can't add anything to really what Nick said. That's kind of everything.
Soz.
No. That's good. That's good. That's amazing. Wasn't really
one thing that I got one thing to add with that the goodbye packet that I send out to them. I actually include, this is where your website is hosted. This is your username. This is the address where you go to log in. I don't give them any passwords in there just to keep it secure. And I mean, passwords always change anyway. But this is who your email's from. This is who your privacy policy is. Like pretty much anything that we've done with the website. This is Google Analytics. Here's the analytics code for you. Just a nice reference for them. And that's just very handy to have.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is essentially what the WOM is really, isn't it? Yeah. So
yeah, I think the WOM doesn't go into quite that much detail because that's what I had like before I even got the WOM.
Yeah, so I had the same sort of thing, and I've kind of fused a couple of things together to make my own.
I added a bit to it, and I took some things out because I had some things that I don't care about and I don't want clients to think about.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've actually covered a shit ton of stuff, and that was really, really good. This is my favorite one yet. So,
hey, Rich, you didn't say anything.
Say hello, Rich.
Yeah, come on, man.
Hey guys.
How are you?
There you go.
Good, how are you? I was just absorbing it all. So yeah, it's been great.
Man, you work with some big clients, man. You work with like hotels and stuff.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah, tell us more about that. Like, is there anything special that you do with onboarding or outboarding, offboarding, whatever?
My processes suck. I just wing it pretty much. So today's been like great for me, but and I don't know if somebody put a post on the admin bar the other day, I think, about the fear they had with the big client. And it's so what with big guys, they know dick too. They know nothing. And it's really nothing to be scared of. My processes really do suck. So this has been great. And I'll definitely be implementing a lot moving forward. But yeah, I mean, I've got nothing to add really.
Yeah, cool. Oh, well, it was good to hear your voice, man. We chat all the time, like in the groups and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that was good to meet you all.
You're Kiwi, yeah?
No, I'm from the UK. I've been over here for 15 years.
But you're in New Zealand now.
Yeah, Queenstown. Yeah.
Nice. So you went there for the skiing and then just never left.
I came for 3 months and never left. Yeah.
Wow.
Illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I like New Zealand. My wife's half Kiwi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're okay, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, right.
They have the best sense of humor, though. Seriously, their comedy is the best.
Yeah. All right. So, I think is that everything. Does anyone have anything they would like to add? even if it's unrelated.
I just got one little comment. It's funny, quite a few of you are names that I recognize in different groups that I'm in and things that you guys are commenting. They're really informative things. And I'd say I'd look up to a lot of you, and it kind of really, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I feel like you jump into it and you're like, oh, I have to have all these processes and have all these things. And it's really kind of great to see that you can have a really good and professional business without having everything sorted. So it's kind of a little bit of a relief to know that not everyone that you aspire to be like.
It is a constant journey, Laura. It's like, man, I can tell you now, my list of things that I've been meaning to get back to fix is like going on 5 years now. There's stuff like 5 years old on there. Like seriously, my offboarding sequence is something that I think 4 years ago I started trying to put that in place. Like once a job was done, and it's like you get through like half of it, it's like you need to stop to do something else, and then you never get back to it.
And on that point, like I've done a lot of time over the years working for agencies, all sorts of agencies, and it shouldn't be the case, but it's really hard to find a correlation between how organized a business is and how successful they are. Sometimes they've just got it because of the things they do organize are the things that really work for them and really are important. So all of this stuff, I think it's really good to know yourself and what type of personality you are and how you need to work. So, yeah.
No, I think it's good. I think it really kind of highlights that saying, what is it, done is better than perfect.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
I remind myself a lot. I find it really helpful.
Well,
it's nice to get other people's perspectives too. I mean, I've never worked for another agency, so I don't know how other people do stuff. So it was kind of nice to finally connect up with a community and go, oh, that's what I should have been doing. Oops.
And that's probably the biggest thing that I got when I've worked for other people is how quickly you learn because other people are doing shit. Like even if it's development stuff or design stuff, it used to happen in WordPress all the time where someone would go away and be like, I'm going to test this plugin, or I'm going to review our caching plugins or our security plugins. And they'd come back and you'd be like, this is the one we're going to use. So you never have to think about it. Someone's done all that work. And that's why these things are so important, because even if it's something small like that, you can all learn from each other. And it means we don't have to, you don't have to take every single path that we suggest, but it means you don't have to try them all.
Yeah, Leanne, I was going to say something similar in the sense that like every time we chat or every time I catch a replay, it's like I pick a little bit more and I just make a little adjustment or a little pat on my back, like, oh, I'm not completely losing my mind trying to get this all together myself,
Yeah. You guys know the story about the English cycling team, right? Have you guys heard that one? So the English cycling team, basically they used to suck, like they were terrible. And then they got this new coach and he focused on 1% improvements across the board, like everything, like even the most microscopic stuff, like things like their tool rooms, their tool bus painted all the walls black, because when the walls were black, you'd notice any specks of dust and stuff on there. And so they'll keep it clean and people were breathing fresh air. Like the suits they wore, the bikes they rode, like everything was just like microscopic improvements, and like did that over like a period of 2-3 years. And after 3 years, they started winning the Tour de France. And it was like unheard of. Like England don't win that. They're terrible. And they started winning year after year after year. It's a really cool, like if you look it up, like English cyclists 1% or something like that, you'll probably find heaps of stuff about it. But that's kind of how I look at business as well. It's not necessarily about doing the big sweeping stuff. Like that's usually the people who get suckered with the gurus out there and like buy this thing and it will solve everything for you and give me the 1497 or 1997 or whatever it is. It's like, no, you don't really need to have all of that. You can go manual as hell. Like you don't need to go and buy everything, all the different softwares. You don't need to have crazy project management tools. Like you can project manage in Excel if you want, like Jesus, like it's doable. So don't, like it's those little things when you need them as well. Like, like a lot of processes that I implement is because I need that process right now. It's like, oh, I've got, a client. I've got the first client that I've had to reset midway through. Let me like reconfirm my process for doing that. how I go about resetting the design process. And I'm like, you know what? Let me, because this client is a pain in the ass, let me really reconfirm my actual design process. And that was really good. So
that's so true, because with the that's so true that you just said that, because a lot of that for me is canned emails. Like I'm not always sending the same thing all the time. Sure, I am. There's those ones that are part of your workflows, but just, you know, you guys know from the group recently that I was working through firing a client, and it's like, well, you know what, there's a termination process. Although my contracts have this, there's a whole process that I've never had to actually go through before, because I've never gone that far. I've always just kind of dealt with it until a contract ended, and then just said, sorry, not renewing. Yeah. So, but now it's like, I have a legit email in my canned emails that I'm just like, well, if I ever have to do this again, I feel like I have the security blanket of being like, I've done this, I got this, you know.
You know,
I learned that from, you know, our group and all of us getting together and these little bits. And today I'll walk away and I'll take the little bits from Trisha's form and I'll make mine tweaked a little bit better so that the wording, and I'll get a little bit stronger, and I maybe will shut up more in my calls and type more instead of talk more. And, you know, it all just keeps snowballing. So I appreciate these calls a lot. And even if it is going at 11:30 at night here.
You're doing well. That's great. Awesome.
I'm a night owl. I do not wake up in the morning, so this is my prime time. No.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much for joining again. It's been amazing. I think that's probably my favorite call yet so far. It's really cool. So I've got to type some of this stuff up and put it in the group. I think there's so much stuff in here, especially some of these links. So
I can get it transcribed if you want. I've got heaps of credits.
Oh, why not? Yeah.
You know what else I was going to mention was one of the things we were talking about processes and we were talking about tools. One of the things was this note taker. And I don't know if you guys seen it, but it's basically like, it's called Perfect Recall, and it can join your Zooms with you.
Yeah, I've got it, and I normally have it on this Zoom, and I didn't let it in on this Zoom, but I don't really want a transcript of this stuff. I really just want to be able to like write an overview and just say, hey, these are the things that we talked about, and a couple of things that I guess were standouts that I noticed, and then everyone can chime in and sort of put that.
Sure. Usually during the meeting with Perfect Recall, I just grab the little bits during the call. You know,
I didn't like Perfect Recall.
You what?
I was like, I didn't like it. I was like, nope, this is shit.
The video quality is not very good, but the actual...
I don't really use the video. I just use the like during the call because it's all typed up. So I just grab it and throw it in like a Google Doc or whatever. I just copy it over.
Yeah, you can pull up a note at the same time. It's actually, it is not too bad. Anyway,
sorry.
No, all good. Awesome. All right. Thanks again, guys. And I'll see you next time, hopefully. See you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.